Welcome to part 2 of this tutorial on creating our very first website. Today we're going to finish the other 2 pages that we were missing in the first video. If you have not seen that video, I would suggest you go see that first. Here, let's get into it. So we are back in our first HTML document, our index file, which is our home page. And before we continue on our journey of learning HTML and CSS, I want to address something that I forgot last time, and that is our image. Basically, we forgot to put our image into another figure element. And I'm going to show you why that is important. First of all, let's create our figure here. And then we're just going to copy out, or actually cut out the end part. We're going to put it under our image. We're going to save. We're going to indent like this. So now our image is inside a figure. Well, why does that matter? First of all, it's indenting our style like this. We're going to change that in a second. But the important part of doing this is because I want to have a text under our image that explains what's on the image, which is different from the alt label here, which is for the computer and potentially a text reader, text-to-speech reader to understand. But I want something for everybody to see, everybody who can visually see the website, to be able to read under our image. So I need a figure. I need a fig caption. And here I'm going to describe our image. And I save and update, and there we see that our text has been updated. We're going to center that as well. First off, we're going to see okay. So instead of adding the margin, or we're just going to remove the margin on our figure here. We're going to add that styling here. Above our image styling, margin 0. And we refresh, and there we go. Back to how it was. And then our fig caption, we want to center as well. We're going to text align, center, hit save, and refresh. And there we go. So you might be wondering, what was the point of all of this? Well, semantically, this is more the correct way to encapsulate an image, because you might have other things here as well. And here you're basically showing the HTML file and the browser that this is a figure. It's going to have an image file. It's going to have an alt text, and it's going to have a caption under the image. So we're telling the HTML file that all of this belongs to a figure. And semantically, this is the correct way to do that. It is also a better way to do that for basically older browsers, different devices, and for it being as accessible as possible for people who might not be able to visually see your web page. The second thing I want to add here in our web page is some more text, because we want to be filling out our text a bit more. We would just want to have more text. So a good hack to know is you basically target everything. You hold Alt and Shift, and then if you press down or up, you're going to be copy pasting that whole section that you are targeting. So that's an easy way to basically copy paste instead of actually doing the manual copy and then pasting. If you are basically just moving or adding some elements right under, it's a very useful hack. So save, and there we go. We have some more text. We're going to make it a bit less spacious. We're going to take away this whatever we want. We're going to just make them a little more spread out. There we go, save. Much better. Now it kind of looks more like what a web page would look like. Feel free, by the way, to put in whatever text you want here to kind of make your own website as we're going. Add the actual content that you want to add. You might be wanting to make a little portfolio or about you page. That's a very common thing to do in the start, and as always as well, like a portfolio page is very fun to be continuously working on and improving. We are going to be doing the same at the bottom here. Here I would like to maybe keep the size text the same. So same thing here, we're going to copy paste by holding Alt and Shift and just pushing the down arrows. Save and update. There we go. So next thing we want to be doing is we want to basically make this nav up here prettier. One thing I want to do is I want to add a margin on the whole site. Because now all the text is a bit too close to the edges. It looks good on a mobile, but on a desktop it's a bit big, like it's a bit too close. We have more space to play with. So we are gonna add, let's see, bear with me here. We are going to create a new element, and we're gonna put the majority of our content, basically everything else that is not in our nav, inside that element. So our header, that is inside our nav, basically from here. Under our header, we are going to add a main element. And what the main element, as you can probably understand, represents is that it's the main part of the web page. We can put it around the footer, we can choose not to. I'm just going to put it around the footer because I want to include the footer in the styling of the main we're going to create. So then we have our main. We are going to remove that initial margin that we have in our body here that we talked about. So we're going to write body. We're going to put our margin to 0 pixels. And we're going to save and refresh. There we go. That is kind of the opposite of what we want, but that is because we want to specifically control our margin of the page only with one element, and that's going to be our main element. So underneath our A styling here, over our figure, we're going to create a main. And we're going to set our margin to 0 auto. Save. Nothing yet. We are going to have our max width of, let's say, 500 pixels. I'm just choosing this randomly now. I'm going to show you what this does in a second. And we're going to give it a padding of 0 and 15 pixels. So 0 on the top and 15 pixels on the sides. Save and refresh. There we go. Doesn't that look a whole lot better? If we ignore the navigation for a second, that looks a bit better, doesn't it? So now I'm controlling the margin of the rest of the page separately from the margin of the navigation, which is going to come in handy. So if we look at the page now in full screen, that is what this 500 max width does. I'm telling the web page that the whole main section, which means basically everything other than the nav, is to be max 500 pixels, regardless of how big the screen gets. So it can shrink. I'm going to show you because it stops here. It can shrink less than 500 and it's going to adapt, which is great, but it cannot grow larger than 500. And this is very useful for desktop versions because you don't want to be like spacing out your text way too much. I do think we have more space to play with here, so I'm going to increase it to 700. I'm going to save. Yeah, that looks way, way better. So back in our code here. Now we want to also center these texts here. And I would also like to make this text a bit prettier. So let's see. What is this? Inspect. It's the H2 and the H1. I don't really have other H2s and H1s, I think. So I could directly now just target them. Let's see. No, doesn't seem like I'm targeting them from before. So inside our main, or under our main, because the main comes first and then the H1 and H2 is inside the main. So you always want to be going from the top to the bottom in your style sheet, trying to make it more of a logic. You don't want to be styling things in random locations. Might be repeating myself here, but it's a very important thing to kind of get into your fingertips right away. So I'm going to target the H1 and I'm going to write a comma. And then I'm going to write our H2 as well. And you might be guessing what this does. If I write a comma between elements here, I'm basically applying the same style to both of them at the same time. And this is one way to improve your code as well, by basically combining as much code as possible. And this is what we call writing dry. Basically, don't repeat yourself. So that is a very important practice in CSS. Inside these text stylings, we want to text, align, center. Straightforward. We save and refresh our site, and there we go. Next up, I would like to do something with these paragraph elements. Do we have paragraph elements here? No, we don't. So we're going to add that right under. I don't want to text align them. Sorry, I don't want to text align them to the center. I want to text align them to justified. And I'm going to save and refresh. And now the text is kind of going to make a justified square box when it can. And when you have a lot of text, I find that that looks quite orderly. You might not like that stylistically, but I do. And that's how you do that. You might have also chosen to text align your text to the right, save, which can be useful to make an interchangeable website where you might have starting out your text and picture aligned to the left, and then it moves to the right, and kind of break up the website in this way. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep it to justify, and we save. So getting back to our header here, it's looking quite ugly. Let's do something about that right now. So first thing is I want this header to follow us when we are scrolling, because that's quite useful both on desktop and especially on mobile. So I want to put this position, and here you get a couple of options. Absolute will basically make your website, it will make your element stay in a position that is not related to any other element on the page. It will kind of drop out of the margins and paddings of other elements. So you can kind of put it based on its own position. But that's not what we want. We want to put it as a sticky element. What that does, we're going to refresh. We're also going to add a top of 0, meaning that it's going to be sticky from its original position, which is 0, as well as left 0. Now when we save and refresh, we see that our navigation menu is following us as we scroll, because the top 0 is here in the left corner and the left 0 is here in the corner. So we basically told it that from this point, which is where it's starting out, you're going to start scrolling. You're going to get sticky from this point. If I change this to, let's say, 50 pixels, look what happens. I save, refresh. Now it's sticky from 50 pixels from the top. I'm going to put that back to 0. Save. Next up, I want to have some background color here, because this doesn't really look good. We want to add a background color of, let's say, let's put aqua, and we save. And now you see that when we scroll, we're not just seeing the text and everything behind it, we are seeing just the background color, which is useful. This color is hideous though. We're gonna click on the color, or we're gonna hold over the color, and here we can actually just drag around to whichever color we want. So let's try something a bit darker and maybe a bit more blue. Feel free to choose whichever color you want, and we click out, we save, refresh our page. Yeah, that's pretty good, maybe a bit lighter. There we go. Yeah, I like it. Now the text is a bit hard to read, so we are gonna also put the color of our text to white. And we save, refresh. We also have to do the color of our header and all the A elements, which are our links, which means the home, about, and the contact, inside the header. And these we want to make white as well. Save, refresh. There we go. Much better. We also need a bit of padding, because now the text is completely to the edge, and we want to make the same padding as our main. Where is our main? It was 0, 15. Yeah, we're gonna just copy that. 0 on our top and bottom, and 15 pixels on our sides. I'm gonna save and refresh, and now it looks way more holistic. It's kind of following the same style on both the header and the navigation. What happens when we open it full screen? It stays the same. That's looking quite sleek. I don't really like what's going on here. I would like a bit more space between these elements, I think. So where are these? Is it this one? I think so. That's our list elements. I want to increase it a bit. Yeah, that looks a bit more, it breathes a bit easier here. Talking about reducing unnecessary code, I just noticed that I have a text align center here, and I have a text align center on these heading elements. So I'm just simply going to copy this fig caption here. I'm going to add a comma. I'm going to paste. And now I can just delete this whole part and save. And it's going to do the exact same thing, but just removing a couple of extra lines of code. This is way easier to then see all the elements that have text align center. Next up, I want to clean up this footer, make it a bit more aesthetically pleasing. Let's see, in our footer, we are text aligning as well. Let's just put this one with our fig caption. And now we can remove this line. We're going to replace it with some padding because I want a bit more space between our main text and our footer. Let's say 30 pixels, but I don't want to add any padding on the sides, so 0. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, better. I also would like it to be a slightly darker, a lighter color. I want it to kind of fade a bit more from the main section of the text. So we're going to just choose black, and then we are going to just put the color a bit up on the grayscale. And we're going to save. Yeah, I like it. As we can see, the actual links haven't changed color, and that is because these are also A elements. So what we're going to do, we're just going to copy and paste this. We're going to remove the footer padding, and we're going to just put an A here. And there we go. If you wanted to, you could also reduce the amount of code here by just adding a footer like this and removing the color, because both the footer and the A elements in the footer have the same styling. So we can save, and there we go. I find that that looks a bit better. I think we have made our first page completely done, and now we can move on to our About page. So as we can see, it is not really looking like anything. We have to actually make them. So this is where I would highly advise you to make the structure of one page first, because now it's going to be very easy for us to just copy paste the elements that we need into our About page. So let's do that right now. So we're just gonna Control A, copy the whole HTML of the indexed file, and we're gonna paste it into the About. We're gonna save, hit refresh. So now we're in Home, and now we're in About. And you can see that by reading the URL here. It changes. Although, of course, they're identically designed right now. We're going to change that immediately. So in our About page, instead of this laptop, we want a picture of ourselves. Let's actually first just change the titles here. About myself. We are going to describe to people cool information about myself and this website I created. And we are going to save. Nice. And then we're going to also remove this, these paragraphs here. We want to start with a picture of ourselves and then text underneath. There we go. Now we need a new picture of ourselves. So back in Unsplash, in order to change our picture, I basically just found this photo of Sergio de Pola. Sorry for butchering your name. I'm going to download that. I'm going to put it in our folder here. And there we go. Close Unsplash. And now, instead of Carrie here, I'm going to put Sergio, save, refresh, and also probably not the description I want to have here. I want to change the fig caption to this is not me, but Sergio de Paula. And now we could keep this text as it is. I think we're going to do that. You could kind of add more information about yourself here at this point. You can tweak it. Of course, add the picture of yourself if that's what you want, or of your favorite hobbies. Go wild here, be creative, adapt it to however you want to have this web page. But as you can see, because we focused on creating our first index page, creating actually the second about page was very, very easy. We have all the elements, we just needed to tweak it. Let's also just change the title. So my about page. You want to have a separate title on each single web page. This is good for SEO, but it is also just standard practice to actually call your web pages different things. So now you see the title here changed. We want to have, we want to keep the H3 of our website title the same. We want to keep our nav the same, and we've changed our H1 and H2, which is showing up here. So I think that's everything. Yeah, then we are done with our about page. Congratulations if you've made it this far. It's exciting when you first get to build your own web page and you actually get to see step by step. It's not that hard. It seems complicated when you're first starting out, but it's really just brick by brick and style by style, and you get something relatively complicated looking with a couple of lines of code. So now we can move on to our contact page. It is completely blank as well. Let's fix that. Let's grab all the text, the HTML content from our about page and paste it into our contact. And we will refresh. Yeah. Now we are going to remove, of course, this picture because we don't need that here. So we're just going to remove the whole figure element here and save. Also hit Alt Z if you find that you have to kind of scroll sideways in your code here to be able to see the whole text. Because if you hit Alt Z, then your code will word wrap like it's doing for me. So whatever the size of my code editor, I will be able to see all of the code. That's a nifty little trick. So now if I refresh and go to contact, you can see that the picture is gone. So here I want to write contact me, and I want to have you can find my info below. Here I could write like a bit of a street address, a phone number, an email. But what I want to have here is instead a contact form. I want people to be able to basically send in a request to me without actually necessarily giving out my own email. We're just going to make the kind of the front end part of that work here, where you can write some text, you can write your email, and then send that in. We'll get to the back end part of that in a different course. We're going to be needing JavaScript for that. First off, we don't need this much text, so I'm going to just remove 2 of the paragraph elements. I'm going to save. There we go. Then, under our paragraph, I am going to be creating something called a form. And I'm going to save, refresh, and no surprise, there's nothing in the form, so nothing is showing up. But a form is basically the element that you use whenever you want people to kind of send in information to you, like their email and a message like we want now. So we're just going to leave the action part here as the hashtag, which is basically not going to do anything. And we're going to put in a method here that is get, which means that we are getting the information from this form. And then inside the form element, we are going to add a label. Oh, what happened? A label. And we're going to say that this label is for email. And we just need this to identify this label element. It can look very complicated, and don't worry about that. These are basically things that you need in order to make the form function properly later. It's not completely necessarily for the stage we are at now, where we just want to make it look good, but I think it's important to just get it in your fingertips right away, the proper way to set up a form. So for the email, we need to just write email. And we're going to save, hit refresh, and we see that it popped up right here. Excellent. Now we need input. We just write input. And we want the type of this input to not be text, because if we choose that, then people can write in whatever they want. We want to, actually I'm going to show you. Save. So here I can write in whatever I want, and if I clicked submit down the line, it would accept it, because text can be whatever. But if I change this to email instead, then down the line when I write in things here and I click enter, you see that I have to include an @ symbol, because emails have that. So it's basically like a safety check here to make sure that people only write in emails in your input form here. We are also going to say that it is required, you just add the required inside the input element. And now people also need to fill this form out in order to hit enter. If I hit enter without writing anything, it's going to tell me that I need to enter something. If I hit enter without adding an @ symbol, then it's also going to tell me that I'm missing that. That is what these two values do. The last thing we need in our input is an ID. And in that ID, we're just going to write email again. So as you can see, it gets a bit repetitive, but that's just things that you need to include. Next thing, we want to have a label for our message. And here we want to have, it's going to be a text area. And we're going to write text area. We're going to hit refresh. There we go. We are going to also add our text area. We're going to call it text area. We're going to give it an ID of text area. We're going to save and look what that looks like. Yeah, that is pretty cool. As you can see, then you can choose the size of your text area. You can also drag it like this, which is different than if you just had if this label was a type of text only and not text area. So that's the benefit of this element. So we're going to just refresh. It is looking quite ugly, but we're going to style this in 1 second. I want to add in our text area that it is also required to put in information here. And in both the text area and our email, I want to actually have a placeholder instead of this label outside of the input field. I want to put email inside and text area or message inside of this one that kind of disappears when people start writing in them, which is a more modern way to make an input form. So how do we do that? Well, for our label, we're going to style that away in our style sheet. And for our input, we're just going to add something called a placeholder. And here, we just call it email. We refresh, and as you can see, email has popped up here. When I start writing, it disappears. So that's exactly what we want. Same for our text area. I'm going to add a placeholder. I'm going to write message. And then same thing, as soon as I start writing, it disappears. Now, we want to hide our label. And we want to do that here. So label, display, none. And now we can see it's getting there, but not quite. In addition to that, I want to style our form so it looks a bit better. We forgot our submit button. We need the submit button as well. So we're just going to put a input, and we're going to put the type of it to be submit. We're going to save. See how that looks. There we go. So over our label here, I'm going to add a form styling. I'm going to tell it that I want it to be a width of 300 pixels. Ta-da! And I want it to be display flex. Ooh, now that's not cool. I want to change the direction of the flex because I don't want it to be as our nav horizontally. I want it to be vertically. So I can just do that, flex direction column. And I save. And what that does, it's going to neatly basically make all of the elements have the same size. I'm going to add a margin because I want it to be in the center of the page. I want it to add the margin and auto. So 0 in the top and automatically on the sides. I'm going to save, refresh, and there we go. It's in the center of our page, and it stays in the center of our page even when the page is expanded. There we go. One thing is missing though, it's quite crowded. I want some horizontal space between these different elements. So I'm gonna add a new styling on the input and on the text area. And I'm gonna tell it that I want a margin bottom of 10 pixels, let's say. Much better. So there we go. I think with that, I'm pretty sure our web page is done. We have our home page. Let me take that full screen. We have our home page where we have a nice picture, some text. We have an image text here. We have a nice navigation bar that follows us. We have a footer that follows us. We have an about page with a picture of not us. And we have a contact page where we can fill out our email, message, and we can submit it if we want. So that's all for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a couple of things. Our website is finished, but there's plenty more to learn. If you want to deep dive more into HTML and CSS, I'm going to be launching courses, more in-depth tutorials and courses on both subjects, as well as JavaScript coming up as well. So we're going to be really deep diving into all the different elements, all the different styling options, how to make our website interactive with JavaScript. So if that is something that excites you, I would highly suggest that you subscribe and give this video a like so that YouTube will show you the next videos that are coming very soon. So until then, I'll see you and have a great one.